we've just gone to the morning break on day 8 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry, Tranche 3, Phase 1. We've been hearing today from Liisa Crossland, who is the second wife of David Crossland, the father of Kevin Crossland. Kevin Crossland was a boy who died age 5 in an air crash in Yugoslavia. His identity was stolen by the undercover police officer James Thomson. We heard quite moving testimony from Liisa today. I'm joined with Donal Driscoll from the Undercover Research Group. Donal, what did you make of what she had to say?
Like all the families of children whose identities were stolen, it's really powerful and moving. It's like each one, as Ming said, each one really brings life who these individuals were who never got to live lives, and mixed up with that is the tragedy of their deaths and the impacts they had on their family, and how this is bringing it all back. And we have quite graphic an account of how he died. It's like things like it was a plane crash. The majority of the family was on a holiday. The majority of the family were killed. It was just the father left, and you're just sitting there imagining what it must have been like to survive that.
Yeah, really, really disturbing. She talked about the survivor guilt that David, Kevin's father, experienced throughout his life. We heard a lot of details about the way in which James Thomson used the identity of Kevin Crossland. As you may be aware, supposedly the Special Demonstration Squad had ended its practice of using dead children's identities as early as 1993. Thomson wasn't deployed until 98, but he joined the SDS in 96. He already had the birth certificate of Kevin Crossland at that time. It appears it had been accessed in 1991, which is something a detail I wasn't familiar with before, suggesting that he'd been using Kevin Crossland's identity or had it in his possession anyway, for a good 5 years before joining the SDS. We saw the paper trail of how he used the identity in order to he gave the name to Surrey Police, to Sussex Police. Interestingly, the family were living in Surrey at the time, which would have made things much worse. He used it to get a driving license. He put the name on the electoral roll. He registered the water bill, the electric bill, the phone bill in the name. Really, extensive use of this identity. He never did use it for when he got arrested, which is supposedly what he had got the identity for in the first place. He even used it to access the USA. And we saw quite a lot of documents that showed that the police were well aware of this, but decided to mete out no punishment for him for it. They said it was a very serious offence, but because of the secrecy of the SDS, it wasn't going to be revealed.
Oh yeah, no, the SDS don't like to wash their laundry at all. It's not so much about washing the laundry in public. It's like nope, nothing to see. Anything that breaches as Lambert's golden rule of "thou shalt not betray the SDS." The omerta is strong in this unit. So he's a classic example of an officer who got away with doing whatever he wanted. But there's a lot of questions around this now. We know that special branch officers would go down to check birth certificates as all part of their investigation and vetting of people, check they were real as part of the naturalization process, things like this. So it's like, but what really jumps out on this is the degree of premeditation. This was not a spur of the moment thing. And James Straven's supposedly talking about how he was losing his identity and stuff, but no, actually there's a lot of premeditation here. To have kept the certificate, to have maintained it, it takes time and effort to set all that up, and none of it rings true. None of it rings true. It's like, why did you need it? It's like he had his own passport. He had his real identity, which he could go to America on. He didn't need to go to. Like he was saying, I wanted to go to America, but I couldn't do it on my false identity. But you had your real thing. Why did you need another identity to do this? How are you going to set up a career under yet another name? It's not straightforward. So a lot of things are just not adding up. And yeah, he was doing a lot of this not far from where the family lived.
Yeah, there were a lot of disturbing elements, little details that we learned this morning, which were quite distressing. One of the ones which I found really kind of unnerving was that very soon after the inquiry informed the family that James Thomson had stole the identity of Kevin Crossland, Liisa Crossland suffered a burglary. Her home was broken into, first time this ever happened, first time it ever happened in the street apparently. And she said that though the house, the windows were smashed, every internal door was opened, all her drawers were opened and her papers spread everywhere, nothing was stolen. She said she checked and she's pretty sure that nothing at all had been stolen. And she thinks that it was connected. She believes that the break-in and the fact that she would now been aware that Kevin's identity had been stolen by James Thomson were a related thing. I mean, it really made me think about what we heard yesterday from Ellie, saying that she feared reprisals from James Thomson because she knows the kind of man he is and that he would go out of his way to act like he'd been paid to do that kind of work for the police. He'd do it for himself just as quickly.
Yeah, and like one incident you could maybe brush off, but there's too much going on, and there's too much. What we're seeing, you know, it's painting a really, really dark picture of James Thomson, which for many reasons we know there's issues, but you know, you can see why they're troubled. You can see why they're troubled by this, and yeah, it is odd, and things aren't being. There's no clear answers, and you know, this is not the first time the burglaries have come up in relation to Spycops and stuff. So you know, it feels like their fears of are grounded. You know, you can't just walk away from them and say that's paranoia. There's something going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I found it quite interesting that Liisa Crossland said that that her and David had many lovely friends in the police. But I mean, she feels she can't trust them anymore. She wouldn't have them in her house. But she said that back in the late 70s, she recalled an incident where David came home late one night after being playing darts with his friends who were police officers, and was very distressed. And he said to her that he'd been told by his police friends that they used the identity of dead children as part of their deployments, part of their work. She didn't understand what the reference was. She couldn't understand why that would be necessary. It was called to mind that this would have been in the aftermath of when Rick Gibson was exposed by Big Flame for using a dead child's identity. I mean, it was wondered if it was connected to that, but even so, it was something that she said she'd forgotten for many years. But these revelations had brought back to the forefront of her mind.
It's a really disturbing detail because this is not somebody with a particular axe to grind, or it's a story from the 70s. It says that this practice is actually way wider. You have to type in, well, why would James Thomson go get that certificate in the first place? What was he checking up? There's just lots and lots of, this is not quite right, but it also says there's a bigger scandal out there about the use of dead children. So far we've only heard about the Metropolitan Police. There's an obvious question. Were Surrey Police using it? And if so, why?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is telling. I mean, not just that he got the identity 5 years before he joined the SDS, but also nearly all the undercover officers, when they were selecting the identity of a dead child which to use for themselves, they would generally take one with the same first name as themselves. Yeah. James Thomson took the name Kevin Crossland. It doesn't quite line up really with what we've seen in every other case.
Yeah, no, it's quite a mismatch. And when his actual cover name is the same as his first name. His real name's James Straven. Sorry, his real name is James Thomson. His cover name is James Straven. So he was part of that practice. So yeah, but we also have learned, when you look at the Scott affair and all the stuff, is like these weren't the men of the highest moral standing. We already see how easy it was for them to slip into adulterous relationships. It's quite clear that special branch, the propriety of special branch isn't there. They like to hold themselves up as, especially the managers, as these officers with strong training, strong moral background, blah blah blah. And it's just like, what's going on? This is not the picture that we're getting here.
No, not at all. I mean, a real villain, James Thomson. Anything else you want to say about Kevin Crossland?
It's just, just to repeat what earlier, it was, listening to these people give life and talk about their loved ones, and the impact on their family. Like today, like on last week, Gunn tried to, blame the inquiry essentially for having that cat out of the bag, for these families would never have found out, the SDS never intended anybody found out, so there was no harm done. But and Liisa Crossland made the point, it's like, well, what happened if he got arrested in that name and the police turned up on his doorstep while her husband's dying of cancer? That's how little consideration they had. You imagine the devastation. So like they thought, well, nobody would have found out. Well, there's a million and one ways these things go wrong, and they just didn't care.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought that was one detail we didn't mention, the fact that David Crossland did die of cancer in 2001. Was they diagnosed it in 2000? So it was at the time when James Thomson was using that identity that he was undergoing that terminal illness. Yeah, deeply disturbing. Okay, we're having a short break at the moment, but when we go back in, we'll be hearing from L3. L3 was a Hunsab and rights activist who was targeted by James Thomson and went on the trip to France, which L3 knew to be a wine drinking trip, but James Thomson was Operation Lime, a very complex, concocted plot to supposedly acquire a firearm and have that firearm be stolen as part of some revenge plan against a hunter who had attempted to kill basically L1, a Hunsab, by repeatedly driving over him. There's a lot to come out from that, and we'll do another video after that. Anything you want to say about that before it starts?
Oh, just this whole story is just so out there. Like, as always with inquiry, you think you've heard everything. Very much looking forward to L3's evidence. Yeah,
we'll do that in a bit. Just to say, today Liisa Crossland gave a really powerful testimony. She was flanked by her son, Mark. The other members of her family were in the public gallery, so strength and solidarity to all of them. It wouldn't have been easy to give the testimony she did today, and it was incredibly powerfully delivered. All right, thanks for joining, and we'll see you in a bit.